A continuación, Panzers, los tanques de Hitler, eran los puños de acero de su ejército. Penetrando profundamente en las líneas enemigas, este revolucionario instrumento de guerra blindado poseía gran velocidad y poder. Sea testigo de la avanzada tecnología de la ingeniería alemana, paso a paso, cañón a cañón. Los antiguos paisajes se convierten en campos de batalla.
Fire, dust, and later it's absolutely quiet inside the tank.
Esta es una historia de increíbles triunfos y errores fatales. Los hombres y las máquinas de los poderosos Panzers de Hitler. Armas de guerra. Las divisiones Panzer.
Toda una revolución bélica. Los tanques, la artillería y la infantería mecanizada se movían con una velocidad y un poder devastadores. Destruían las defensas enemigas, cortaban las líneas de suministros y minaban la resistencia del enemigo. Esto era el Blitzkrieg, o guerra relámpago. El plan de Hitler para la conquista de Europa dependía del éxito de sus fuerzas élites, las divisiones Panzer. El general Guderian, a cargo de los Panzers, proclamó: "Si los tanques tienen éxito, la victoria continuará". Tenía razón. En menos de un año, la mayor parte del continente estaba en poder del puño de acero de los Panzers. Al comienzo de la guerra, las unidades blindadas de Hitler aplastaron toda resistencia enemiga con ataques masivos combinados. Los tanques Panzer devoraban terreno mientras los granaderos Panzer los seguían y se apoderaban del territorio que dejaban atrás. Las orugas Panzer cruzaron los campos desde Noruega hasta África del Norte, desde el Canal de la Mancha hasta las estepas rusas. El general Hans Guderian, arquitecto de la guerra relámpago, se convirtió en héroe nacional. La juventud alemana soñaba con formar parte de las divisiones Panzer.
For me, there was no doubt in my mind I wanted to be a tank officer. It's very hard to explain, but I think there are many factors to success. A certain glamour, the spirit of the tank corps fascinated me. Maybe the uniform, I don't know. I mean, it's hard to remember exactly, but for me there was no doubt in my mind I wanted to be a tank officer. And I was a tank, I became finally a tank officer.
Pero la primera vez que Wolfgang Sturner estuvo en combate fue durante la batalla más difícil librada por los Panzers. En 1943, al calor del verano ruso, 2 millones de hombres y miles de tanques se enfrentaron en Kursk, en la batalla de tanques más grande de la historia.
At that time, when I reached the battlefield, of course there were no room for any romantic or other dreams or whatsoever. The reality kept us fully occupied, more than that. Of course, I was still very young at that time, over 17 years of age. And then to be in the command of a tank, that really took my entire effort I had to bring in those days. We fought until the almost complete exhaustion. For 3-4 days in a row, you went back only in order to fuel up ammunition, a short sleep, and on you had to go again because we had tremendous losses at the time. It was hot, it was very dusty. This was a fighting on point-blank range because due to the dust and due to the extreme mass of tanks, we could recognize each other only on the shortest distance and then fire. Kind of rough going, I would say.
La derrota de Kursk fue el comienzo de la prolongada retirada de los Panzers. Alemania subestimó la capacidad de sus oponentes y sobreestimó su propia capacidad para mantener el feroz avance de la guerra relámpago. Al ver los primeros tanques atravesar la tierra de nadie en la Primera Guerra Mundial, habría sido difícil vaticinar que la guerra relámpago sería el futuro de esta nueva arma. Estos pocos tanques estaban diseminados en el campo de batalla y avanzaban pesadamente. Asemejaban bunkers con ruedas que protegían a la infantería del fuego de ametralladoras. La única excepción se dio en noviembre de 1917 en la batalla de Cambrai. Los británicos utilizaron 400 tanques en lo que fue el primer ataque blindado masivo.
The British tank offensive at Cambrai was successful in penetrating the German lines, but due to the lack of supporting infantry and artillery, the attack eventually petered out. The Germans were able to reform their lines in front of the British advance. And this is one of the reasons that the German army did not really consider the tank to be an important weapon.
El ejército alemán tenía un solo tipo de tanque en la Primera Guerra Mundial, el pesado A-7B, un dinosaurio mecánico de 30 toneladas con una tripulación de 18 hombres que podía alcanzar una velocidad máxima de un poco menos de 8 kilómetros por hora. Para finales de la guerra, Alemania había construido cerca de 20 de estos gigantescos tanques.
The Germans, of course, had been defeated. They were demoralized. The Treaty of Versailles limited them to an army of 100,000 men with no tanks and no combat aircraft. Germany then was faced with the prospect of having to defend itself with minimal resources. Their leaders had to come up with a way to mobilize the troops so that fewer men could do the job of a much larger conventional army.
El general Heinz Guderian estudió las teorías británicas y francesas sobre guerra blindada, nuevas y radicales teorías que profetizaban la victoria con tanques de alta velocidad y ataques de infantería mecanizada apoyados por artillería y unidades aéreas. Mientras que los ejércitos aliados pasaban por alto estas ideas, Guderian puso a prueba y mejoró estas nuevas teorías con un arsenal de tanques de madera. Guderian diseñaría también los planos para la guerra relámpago.
In the beginning of the war, I was under his command. The General Oberst Guderian, he was called as the father of the tank units, And his idea was to take all the tanks together, followed by armored infantry, followed by artillery, especially self-propelled, and all the other units must have the same speed in the field as the tank units.
Pero los líderes alemanes de la vieja escuela veían a Guderian como un rebelde. Ellos se aferraban a la noción de que los tanques debían ser dispersados en el frente de batalla para servir de apoyo a la infantería.
And Guderian said, no, the tanks must come together and must attack all together.
En 1933, Guderian y su pequeña fuerza de tanques llevaron a cabo una demostración que terminó con las discusiones. Adolf Hitler, el nuevo canciller electo de Alemania, vio en ellos un enorme potencial y declaró: «Esto es lo que quiero. Esto es lo que tendré». Ese fue el nacimiento de las divisiones Panzer. Secretamente, la industria alemana comenzó a producir las armas que pondrían en práctica las nuevas tácticas. Los tanques fueron llamados Traktora para esconder su identidad. El primer tanque que salió de la línea de producción fue el Panzerkampfwagen 1. Podía llevar una tripulación de 2 personas y tenía 2 ametralladoras. El tanque era simple y económico, y a pesar de estar armado, este primer Panzer fue destinado a usarse solo para entrenamiento de tropas. En 1935, el ejército recibió el Panzerkraftwagen II, un diseño mejor armado que poseía un cañón de 20 milímetros y podía llevar una tripulación de 3 personas. Este Panzer le dio al ejército un mayor poder ofensivo. El 20 de abril de 1938, para el cumpleaños número 50 de Hitler, las divisiones Panzer exhibieron con orgullo sus nuevas armas.
Wir waren stolz darauf.
We were very proud of having these new tactics, and we were very proud of having Guderian. We were also proud of having good tanks, and most of all, we were very proud of being well trained for this new kind of armored warfare.
Für diesen Panzerkampf gut ausgebildet zu sein.
Armas de Guerra continuará en un momento. Armas de Guerra.
Al amanecer del 1 de septiembre de 1939, la guerra relámpago de Guderian se hizo realidad. 6 divisiones Panzer, más de 3.000 tanques, invadieron Polonia mientras en los cielos los Stukas de la Luftwaffe bombardeaban bases aéreas y líneas de suministro. El ejército polaco opuso una tenaz resistencia, pero sus tácticas y equipos obsoletos no pudieron resistir la marea de acero de los Panzers. El 27 de septiembre, Polonia se rindió ante Alemania. Los Panzers, que desfilaron frente a Hitler pocos meses antes, ahora marchaban victoriosos en el primer país en caer ante la guerra relámpago. La campaña de Polonia sirvió de preparación al ejército alemán para la invasión de Francia.
The Germans invaded France and the Low Countries on May 10th, 1940, the Germans had fewer tanks, about 2,700, compared to more than 3,000 French tanks and several hundred British tanks. And further, the French tanks were superior in quality, but they were inappropriately dispersed throughout the country. Every division, every unit had some tanks assigned to it that were not located in mass. The Germans, on the other hand, had concentrated their effort in a front less than 200 miles wide at its widest part, and in there they had concentrated their armor.
The tactic was a concentrated tactic of concentrating our tanks, followed by the infantry. In the beginning, it was so successful because of the overwhelming force we could muster in a surprise attack.
In France, we became aware of just how superior our tactics were. I remember during the attack, looking out of my tank and seeing tanks everywhere, in front of me and behind me. It was this massing that was the reason for our success.
Within 24 hours, we crossed 3 borders. We went from Germany to Luxembourg, from Luxembourg to Belgium, from Belgium to France. And we had the French as opponents, and they were so stunned about our appearance that they didn't make any resistance whatsoever.
La rendición de Francia no se debió a equipos superiores, sino a tácticas superiores. Hitler envió a su ejército a la guerra antes de que estuviese totalmente equipado. Los ataques fueron liderizados por los tanques de entrenamiento con armamento ligero, los Panzer I y II. Los alemanes reforzaron las divisiones Panzer con tanques capturados durante la ocupación de Checoslovaquia en 1938.
German industry was not able to supply the numbers of vehicles and weapons required. And as a result, you can make a very good case that Hitler could not have gone into Poland or France or even Russia later in 1941 if he had not had the output of the excellent Czech armament industry.
La producción de tanques de combate más pesados, los Panzers III y IV, había comenzado, pero estos todavía eran pocos durante los ataques a Polonia y Francia. El Panzer III fue diseñado como tanque principal de penetración. A diferencia de la mayoría de tanques que contaban con más blindaje en la parte frontal, el Mark III poseía la misma cantidad de blindaje en todos sus flancos.
It was expected that initially these tanks would overrun the enemy's frontline defenses and might be vulnerable to anti-tank fire from the rear.
El Panzer IV estaba mejor blindado en su parte delantera, pues estaba diseñado para viajar con apoyo de la infantería. El tanque estaba dotado de un cañón Howitzer de 75 milímetros para destruir fortificaciones y nidos de ametralladoras enemigas. El Panzer IV se convirtió en la columna vertebral de las divisiones Panzer.
It was not primarily intended as an anti-tank weapon, and indeed during the invasion of France and later Russia, early Panzer IVs with the short howitzer were almost completely incapable of knocking out enemy tanks.
El liderazgo decisivo, así como el comando y control efectivo, llevaba a los alemanes a la victoria.
The armor visionaries like Guderian felt that it was essential to lead armored units from the front because of the speed of their movement and the fact that they often would encounter unexpected obstacles. Leadership on the spot, unhindered by long lines of communication, was essential to seize the initiative.
Los comandantes de tanques Panzer eran entrenados para pensar y actuar independientemente en el campo de batalla.
The great difference between us and other armies was that we were not given specific orders. We were given mission orders. If we were given the order to attack a village, I could decide when and where to do it. It was my decision how I accomplished this mission. The difference was that I could react to constantly changing conditions on the battlefield as long as I achieved my goal.
Una red de sofisticadas líneas de comunicación ayudaba a coordinar los ataques de armas combinadas.
In a tank division, we had a liaison officer from the Air Force. And this liaison officer gave the pilots exactly where are the targets. It was absolutely a revolution in the beginning of the war on our side.
Mientras que sus oponentes se comunicaban con arcaicas señales de mano y banderas, los Panzers estaban dotados de modernos equipos de radio FM.
Our tanks was equipped with communication lines. And we can talk from one tank to another. The platoon commander can talk to all tanks, and the company commander can do it also. But the leading of the tanks was very simple.
We used to have certain codes we applied and which we changed, if possible, from day to day. I can remember one word, it was enemy infantry, was the word Prediger Ölsardinen. Now that means preacher and sardines. So, I mean, it is just one thing I remember. But radio connection was absolutely a must and very important.
Over the radio, we can talk all together in the tank. The crew commander to the driver to the operator to the loader, and to the signalman. And the communication was excellent, given by not this microphone, that's living here. It was excellent.
Los ingeniosos micrófonos de garganta no transmitían el ensordecedor ruido del tanque y hacían que la eficiencia de la tripulación sobrepasara a la de sus oponentes. En febrero de 1941, Erwin Rommel, héroe de la Batalla de Francia, fue enviado al África para ayudar a los italianos a luchar contra los ingleses. Las osadas tácticas de Rommel redefinieron los conceptos de la guerra relámpago.
He regarded the tank as the raiding weapon supreme. He was able to develop tactics that used small groups of tanks and other arms that would penetrate deep into the enemy's rear, getting behind the lines, turning up where he was least expected. And he did this by personal example, leading either with the tanks themselves or flying over them in a light aircraft, but always up there, pushing, chivying, much the same way as Guderian had done in 1939 and 40. But Rommel carried it to a greater extreme, and he wanted to be there to keep behind, to keep the momentum going all the time. He was a raider.
Und Rommel ist unser selbstverständlich für einen Afrikamann.
Rommel was our idol for all of us who served in Africa. But we would have preferred if he wasn't always so far out in front. We were always worried about his safety.
Von der Front rückwärts sich aufgehalten hätte.
Rommel, el zorro del desierto, constantemente derrotaba a sus adversarios utilizando menos tanques y hombres.
Rommel was particularly good at using his tanks as a screening force to draw out the British into range where he could then fight with what was his major anti-tank weapon, and that is the dual-purpose 88mm gun. The 88 was, in North Africa, practically a wonder weapon. It was able to knock out any Allied tank at a range of 2,000 yards or better.
Rommel y el Africa Corps operaban en el desierto como barcos en el mar, haciendo regresar a los británicos a Egipto en menos de un mes. El liderazgo de Rommel hacía que sus tropas se sintieran invencibles, pero esa sensación no duraría mucho.
In the beginning, I had no fear because I had not felt any pain. I had not been wounded, not burned. Fear came a little bit later.
Armas de Guerra continuará en un momento. Armas de Guerra.
El 22 de junio de 1941, Alemania lanzó la Operación Barbarossa, la invasión de Rusia. La Luftwaffe obtuvo la superioridad aérea destruyendo 1.200 aviones rusos para el mediodía. En las primeras semanas de la invasión, las unidades Panzer avanzaron más de 40 millas diarias y Hitler anunció la conquista de Rusia en 8 semanas.
The Germans struck so quickly with such massive forces that they completely overwhelmed the initial Russian defenses. Even though those defenses were extensive, the Russians had over 20,000 tanks on the western frontier, a couple of million troops, thousands of aircraft. And yet within 6 months, the overwhelming majority of this force had been captured or destroyed.
Confiado por sus victorias anteriores, el ejército tardó demasiado en mejorar sus tanques. Su inteligencia no les advirtió acerca del mortífero tanque ruso T-34.
Our infantry and our soldiers, it was shocking because they cannot do anything against this T-34. Because it was a very, very simple but a strong tank. Simple, decent engine, no comfort inside the tanks, but a very, very big and excellent gun. On the 12th of July, I saw the first T-34 attacking our regiment. It was 3 tanks, 3 34 tanks. And our guns was not strong enough to kill the T-34. So that the first 34 was killed running against another. And the crew commander from our tanks, he jumped over and put a hand grenade into the Russian tank.
It was quite a surprise for us that it could kill us from over 1,000 meters, so we had to find a way to knock it out. We'd hide behind a hill and wait for it to get really close, and then we'd shoot at it from the side. It usually took 3 to 4 of our tanks to knock out one T-34. The big disadvantages they had were they had no radio communications and they had no tank commander. Their gunner would have to look out the top of the tank, assess the situation, then duck back down inside the turret to fire. This gave us time to get close enough to knock him out.
Para finales de noviembre, los Panzers llegaron a 19 millas de Moscú, pero ese sería el límite del avance alemán. La fuerza de invasión se había movido más rápido que sus líneas de abastecimiento y se enfrentarían pronto a un enemigo más letal que el cañón del T-34, el brutal invierno ruso.
We had started a two-front war and we had made no preparations for this winter. No preparations for our clothing, for our weapons, or for our engines.
Die Kälte hat uns am meisten zugesetzt.
The cold made it incredibly difficult. It got down to 35 degrees below zero with snowstorms. We had to keep the engines running all night to keep them from freezing. There wasn't any heating in the tanks, so the entire inside of the tank would be covered with ice, just from our breath.
All the pipes in our tank frozen, and we got no fuel, no ammunition, no men, and the men were without coats and winter clothing. It was horrible, you know. There were few hospitals in the front. Everybody had the absolute will to stay healthy, because if you were wounded, it was more or less a death sentence.
En diciembre, los rusos lanzaron una contraofensiva con tropas bien preparadas para el helado clima. En las heladas estepas rusas, los Panzers sufrieron su primera derrota. Sorprendidos por las bajas, los alemanes lucharon desesperadamente por recuperar la superioridad. Los tanques fueron dotados de blindaje más grueso y el Panzer IV fue mejorado con un cañón largo de 75 milímetros. En septiembre del 42, el nuevo tanque Tiger salió apresuradamente de la fábrica para unirse a las debilitadas divisiones Panzer del Frente Oriental.
The Tiger I was originally developed from the concept of the breakthrough tank to make it so powerful and so well protected that no Allied tank would have a hope of destroying it.
Este inmenso tanque fue dotado del cañón más mortífero del mundo, el infame 88 milímetros.
Mit dem Panzer III und dem Panzer IV haben wir den
With the Panzers III and IV, we could start the firefight from only about 400 to 1,000 meters. Now with the 88mm gun and the Tiger I, we could destroy any enemy from about 1,800 to 2,000 meters. We could now go into battle with a great feeling of confidence and superiority. I remember at the end of 1942 on the Northern Front, I was in the Tiger and I was faced with 30 enemy tanks. I was able to knock out 15 of them without being hit.
Dem stand ein großes Problem, vor allem auch.
There was one big problem. At 60 tons, we were always in danger of sinking into the mud. And at the Northern Front, there was a lot of wet and muddy terrain. It was hardly possible to find a bridge that we could cross unless the engineers were to fortify them in advance.
Inicialmente, el Tiger era poco confiable y difícil de mantener. Incluso después de resolverse estos problemas, la industria alemana nunca podría cubrir la demanda de las divisiones Panzer por la nueva arma. Solo se produjeron 1,350 Tigers.
Ja, das war unser Problem, dass wir niemals.
The fact was, it was never a battle one-on-one. It was always 1 against 5, 1 against 10. It was common for a Tiger to be facing 12 enemy tanks. I can remember when we were pulling back from Leningrad, and there were 3 Tigers. We destroyed 52 Russian tanks, but they still had more tanks coming at us.
Armas de Guerra continuará en un momento.
Hitler había anticipado que el pueblo soviético se derrumbaría bajo el peso del ataque, pero esa resistencia solo aumentó. Hitler lanzó delirantes ataques en Leningrado y Stalingrado. Las fuerzas blindadas estaban desesperadamente escasas de hombres y equipo. En el verano de 1943, los alemanes se reagruparon. Hitler preparó sus tropas para la Operación Citadel, un avance contra una saliente que se había formado en las líneas rusas cerca de Kursk. Hitler había demorado el ataque hasta que su nuevo tanque Panther llegase al campo de batalla.
By contrast with the Tiger, the Panther was a much lighter and much more balanced vehicle. It was well armored. It was the German equivalent of the T-34. In fact, the T-34 in many ways influenced the design concepts that grew into the Panther.
Al igual que el tanque ruso, estaba diseñado con blindaje inclinado, una innovación que protegía mejor a la tripulación. El poder de fuego del cañón de 75 milímetros de alta velocidad del Panther era aún más letal que el de 88 milímetros del Tiger.
From 1943 onwards, it was the one tank that most of the Russian and Allied tank crews really feared, far more than the Tiger.
The Panther was a real present for us tank soldiers. It had a much better protection and a much stronger gun. Now we could engage the enemy at well over 1,000 meters.
With the arrival of the Panther, Hitler was ready for the assault. However, Russian intelligence discovered the plan, and the Soviets braced for the attack. With the help of civilians, they dug 3,000 miles of trenches and buried 400,000 landmines. Along their defensive front, they placed more than 400 artillery guns and mortars per mile. Guderian pleaded with the Fuhrer to reconsider his plan. Such an attack would negate all the advantages of blitzkrieg. There would be no mobility, no surprise. The men of the Panzer Corps would not be the highly trained elite force that entered Poland and France.
Later in the war, those who replaced the casualties became younger and younger. They didn't have any experience, so the old staff sergeants took them aside and said, "Now, my boy, listen. You follow our advice, we'll tell you what to do, and if you don't listen, you'll be dead tomorrow."
La batalla comenzó el 4 de julio. Eran 2.700 tanques alemanes contra 3.600 tanques soviéticos.
This was my first battle, and the first battle for the Panther. It was a murderous fight. Over 1 million Russian soldiers and 700,000 German soldiers. I remember during the battle we thought, now this is the end of the world.
Al igual que el Tiger, los primeros Panther experimentaron numerosos problemas mecánicos.
During the first days, it became clear that the engines were not strong enough and could not stand the strain. And there were problems with the transmission. The first breakdowns came during our march to the assembly area. We tried to repair them as quickly as possible and send them back to the front.
In the first couple of days, it looked like the Germans had some success, but eventually they simply ground themselves to pieces on the Russian defenses, and when it was over, the German panzer forces were emasculated. They were no longer able to conduct warfare as they conducted it in the past.
En 50 días de combate, los alemanes perdieron más de 500.000 hombres y 7 divisiones Panzers completas. Los Panzers se vieron forzados a una larga retirada y a una brutal batalla a muerte. La Luftwaffe había perdido la superioridad aérea, convirtiendo a los tanques en blanco fácil del avión de ataque terrestre Ilyushin Stormovich.
For me, the worst thing was if we were under air attack. Now, if you are in a tank and they attack you, then you are completely helpless. You feel like a decoy there. Like if the fighter planes are above you and you have nothing to fight them, and you know it's only a matter of time before they get you, then the feeling is lousy, so to speak.
The day that Adolf Hitler sent his tanks across the Russian borders, the day that he lost World War II, there was no way that the Germans could occupy the Soviet Union. The fact was that the Soviet Union was a nation of over 140 million people, whereas Germany had only 50 million. And in a war of attrition, the larger nation was likely to prevail.
En África del Norte, las fuerzas alemanas también sufrían los efectos de la guerra en dos frentes. El combustible y los suministros se agotaban, y el apoyo aéreo era virtualmente inexistente.
When I was there, we had to make the best of everything. Very, very few tanks. Long lines stretched out to be protected by just a few. We didn't have enough ammunition. We didn't have enough gasoline. We were also afraid that there was sabotage. I remember that I put a finger in the jerry can, you know, sniffing whether there was any water mixed in it because we feared sabotage. I remember sometimes we went into battle and were not gassed up fully. So we just hoped it would be sufficient, you know.
Los aliados habían descifrado los códigos secretos alemanes de radio para poder interceptar y hundir los barcos de suministro antes de que llegaran a puerto.
Rommel was continually forced to scrounge fuel where he could find it, to use captured equipment. In May of 1943, when the final German units in Africa surrendered, almost 85% of their motorized transport consisted of Allied vehicles. The last tanks the Germans had basically ran out of fuel and had to be destroyed.
The time was over for Blitzkrieg. Blitzkrieg is something that happened in Poland and in France. In Africa, at the end, there was certainly no Blitzkrieg.
Armas de Guerra continuará en un momento. Armas de Guerra.
Cuando los aliados invadieron Europa en 1944, su tanque principal de combate era el M-44 Sherman. El Sherman era fuerte, confiable y de fácil manutención. Sin embargo, el Sherman tenía un blindaje delgado y su cañón no podía detener al Panther y al Tiger.
We could kill a Sherman at a much greater distance than they could kill us. Their gun was not as powerful as ours, and it was obvious in a shootout we could get a lot more of them than they could get of us. One hit on the Sherman, and it caught fire right away.
We called the Shermans Ronsons after the Firelighter, because mostly with the first round they blew up. The Sherman always went up. Stood in flames with the first round.
Los aliados tenían que pensar en maneras creativas de eliminar los tanques alemanes. Los tanques alemanes capturados eran enviados al campo de pruebas del ejército en Aberdeen, Maryland.
German tanks are brought here to Aberdeen and they are tested. They're tested in a lot of different ways. They test them automotively. They drive them across a thing called the wash rack. They drive them up and down hills to see what kind of grade they can climb. They drive them up against obstacles to see how much of a vertical clearance they can take. They fire round after round into them to see where the weak points in the armor are. And after a while, a picture emerges of just how effective these things are. And that intelligence information is disseminated to the field. For instance, the early Panther has the gas tanks located aft, and they are exposed. And if you know where the gas tanks are, you want to aim for the gas tanks, because you're not going to penetrate the frontal armor with a 75 gun on the Sherman. But knowing where the gas tank is, you can aim for that position and kill the tank. The Germans knew that we were doing this type of testing. They were doing the same thing to our stuff. This is a common, everyday practice in war.
En diciembre de 1944, los alemanes lanzaron su última ofensiva Panzer a gran escala en la batalla del Bulge. Ahora, a finales de la guerra, estaban peleando con algunas de las armas más modernas de la historia de la guerra. La batalla marcó el debut del tanque King Tiger. El King Tiger fue el tanque más pesado que haya aparecido jamás en el campo de batalla.
It was a real massive brute, 68 odd tons, an 88mm gun, really thick armour. To most Allied tanks, if a King Tiger appeared on the battlefield, you found an excuse and left. But they suffered the same tactical drawback as the original Tiger did. They were very, very slow. They were so slow and cumbersome. To actually move them, even on a battlefield, was a major operation.
Pero los alemanes nunca pudieron producir armas en las cantidades necesarias para contener a los aliados.
Production of tanks and other heavy military vehicles was turned over primarily to heavy equipment manufacturers who were used to building heavy trucks, railroad locomotives, and dockyard cranes in fairly limited numbers, so that they didn't develop a good idea of the mass production that was possible. In the United States, production of military weapons was turned over primarily to the major automotive manufacturers who were used to building tens of thousands of vehicles in a short period of time. The Germans built approximately 5,500 Panther tanks, and the Americans built 52,000 Shermans.
You had two great advantages. You had the greater number and the greater reliability. Our tanks broke down every 100 kilometers and couldn't be repaired, and your tanks, like a clockwork, went on for the whole issue.
The Germans were really overwhelmed by such a volume of equipment that it's really hard to fathom how, in many cases, they held on as long as they did with as little as they had.
A pesar de que todo estaba en su contra, las tripulaciones de los tanques nunca perdieron el espíritu de lucha que caracterizaba a las unidades Panzer.
One of the reasons for the German soldiers' incredible fighting effectiveness was that even when the chips were down, he kept fighting long after the point when perhaps it was even hopeless to continue.
This may be a German characteristic, but we swore at the beginning of our duty to defend our fatherland. And that's how we fought, over and over again. I was wounded 4 times in the tank. You can see a souvenir from Egypt in my face.
We, as a young soldier, we learn to live inside the tank. The problem is only if you are in the field and an anti-tank gun hit your tanks. What happened inside the tank? What happened inside the tank? It started a big fire inside the tank. A lot of dust inside the tank. And later it's absolutely quiet. And you will ask the crew, Willem, are you living? Charles, are you living? And so on. I lost the tank in 5 times. And I lost 1 soldier, who was died in the 5 times. All the others are only wounded. Myself lost 1 eye, and all the others goes in my head, because the crew commander looks out at the tank with his head.
We were young and didn't think much about danger, but the worst would certainly have been if the tank caught fire and we couldn't get out. The crew was very dependent on each other. If there was a hit on the tank, it affected all of us.
Anything else you would like to add?
Möchten Sie noch etwas hinzufügen?
Wir haben so viel Schreckliches erlebt. Es darf keinen Krieg wieder geben.
We have experienced so many terrible things. There should never be a war again.
Iniciada la Segunda Guerra Mundial, la Blitzkrieg no tenía oponentes. En años siguientes, el debilitado ejército alemán demostró ser fácil presa de los ataques relámpago de sus oponentes. En 1967, la victoria israelí en el Sinaí se debió a tácticas relámpago. Y eso mismo ocurrió en el Golfo Pérsico. A pesar de su derrota final, las tácticas de las que las divisiones Panzer fueron pioneras son tan relevantes hoy como lo fueron en el 39. Velocidad, poder y acción independiente son esenciales para la victoria.